Hello and welcome to Scale Stuff. In this week's video I'm going to be building and reviewing the Trumpeter 1/72 scale STRV 103 Swedish S-Tank. Also known as the kneeling tank or headless warrior, this Cold War tank is ruthlessly practical in every aspect. I love the look of this tank and had to have one for my collection. Despite the S-Tank never seeing combat, this little tank really pushed the envelope in tank design, and I'm sure, in time, elements of this little tank's design are going to reappear on future tank releases. In the box you get a black and white instruction set, the parts to make the model, gluable rubber band tracks, and a small sheet of decals. A first quick look at the sprues shows they look pretty standard. There is a little bit of flash on some of the parts, and a few of the really small bits seem to be swamped in flash, but other than that, nothing major is jumping out at me. This kit was first released by Trumpeter in 2005 and has been re-released since this edition with additional parts. Anyway, onto the build. First thing on the menu is the wheels. Thankfully, there are not many on this kit, but they do need a bit of cleanup, mostly just removing the sprue attachment points. With the cleanup done, adding the wheel parts together is nice and simple. Now it's on to the lower hull. There's just a few bits to add here before adding the wheels. Adding the track rollers to the sides really requires tweezers, as it's hard to get in behind the upper part of the fender. With those bits on though, it's time to add the wheels to the tank. With the wheels on, the kit now wants me to add the tracks to the kit, but I'm going to leave the tracks off and add them later on once everything's been painted. Next, it's time to clean up the upper hull piece. This bit really needs some work doing before it can be added. A couple of holes need drilling out towards the front of the hull, and a hatch in the rear of the tank needs cutting out. This is fairly simple to do, as the area to be cut out is marked on the inside of the part. A good sharp knife will make carefully cutting this bit out a lot easier. Pre-work done, it's just a case of adding it to the lower hull. Once that's on, the only thing left to do in this step is add the spare track links to the upper hull. Now it's time to add the tank's dozer blade. The attachment points are a bit fiddly to add. But the dozer goes together easily. It will pay to check the alignment when adding this part to the hull though, so it doesn't interfere with the tracks later on. That done, it's on to adding a few more details. When it came to adding the front side panels, I was glad that there was a hole to clip into, as otherwise adding these bits would have been tricky. Adding what I think is the supports for the swimming kit for this tank is a little tricky. They require a fair push to get them to stay on flush, which will likely throw the jerrycan side skirts out of alignment, so make sure to check they're still on right before leaving this bit to dry. Now it's on to making a machine gun sub-assembly. All the bits here are tiny and a bit floaty to add. This step's very delicate. As soon as it's done, I'm adding it to the tank. The hole for this part needed enlarging to get it to fit flush. To be honest, this is the only step I've not enjoyed so far, and that's mainly because it's all been so fine and fiddly. Thankfully, from here things get easier. It's just adding a few more details to the upper hull. With these details on, it's time to add the barrel. With the barrel on, it's finally starting to look the part. To be honest, this is a strange looking tank as far as tanks go. Next, it's on to adding the holder for the gun. With that and a few little panels added, it's time to add the screens to the front. These bits are a bit delicate to add, so I'm going to leave them to dry for a good amount of time so it's safer to handle later. With the screens on and dry, it's time to add the last details to the rear of the tank. These bits go on easily, but some are a little small and fiddly to add. When it comes to adding the rear stowage boxes to the tank, make sure to check the part numbers as these bits are easily confused. With those details on though, that completes the build stage of this model kit. This is how the model's looking so far. Now it's on to the painting. For the first coat, I'm going to be using Tamiya TS61 NATO Green spray paint, so I get a nice even base coat to work on. As always, I'm spraying this up off screen, outside, to avoid fumigating myself. Base coat on, it's onto painting the first bit of the camo for this tank. For this, I'm using Army Painter Elf Green mixed with Army Painter Demonic Yellow in a ratio of about 3 parts Elf to 1 part Demonic. This Splinter Type 90 camo is really hard to paint, so I'm taking my time with this. I've wanted to paint this camo for ages, but always found all the sharp angles and edges a bit daunting. Next up, it's onto painting the browns. For this, I'm using Army Painter Leather Brown. Again, I'm taking my time painting this. I'm trying to copy what I can from the box art camo guide as it's in colour, but I've mostly given up trying to get it on exact. The main paint guide in black and white is nearly useless though. This splinter pattern really throws the eyes off, but as it's coming together, it's really starting to look the part. Last for the camo, I'm painting the blacks. For this, I'm using Army Painter Matte Black, as the Vallejo Matte Black is too watery for this and would run off too easily. Thankfully, the black camo is fairly easy to follow off the paint guide as it's the darkest thing on there. Painting this camo though has really strained my eyes. While I have the black paint out, I'm also going to paint the wheels and machine guns. This is how it's looking with the camo down. I like how this camo's looking, but I'm kind of glad that's over. Now it's time for the tank's first wash. For this I'm using watered down Vallejo matte black. On this tank I really need to keep an eye on the wash, as there's so many places the wash could pool and ruin the finish. With the wash dry, it's time to add the decals. There's quite a few decals to add to this tank, but they are all really small and tweezers will really help out here. With the decals dry, it's on to doing the dust coats. First I'm giving the tank a light dry brush of Army Painter Skeleton Bone. This goes on okay, but I feel it's a bit too light and stark looking where it goes over the camo pattern. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going over this with a dry brush of Army Painter Elf Green. This goes over the camo a lot better, blending the camo bits together a bit and making highlighted raised areas look like the camo paint has worn off and is showing the base coat underneath. Next it's time to add some details to the tank. First thing I'm sorting out is the viewing ports. These areas I'm simply painting with Army Painter Deep Blue, just to pick them out from the rest of the tank. Then I move on to paint the rear lights on the tank. For this I'm using Army Painter Pure Red. Now it's on to painting the tool handles on the tank with BS Dark Earth, though I think in real life these tool handles are just painted green. I think that the model could do with a bit more colour though, so yeah, doing the handles a different shade. With the tool handles done, I sort out the metallic areas of the tank, painting the gun and tools and lights with Army Painter Plate Mail Silver. Lastly, for the details, I revisit the tank with some watered down black. Firstly, picking out all the air intakes on the tank, which there are a surprisingly large amount of. Then I highlight some of the tank's panel lines with this mix. Around this time I noticed I'd completely ignored the spare track links, so I'm sorting this out while I've got that colour out. This is how the tank's looking with the details done. Now it's on to painting the tracks. Off screen I've given the tracks a base coat of matte black. Firstly, I give the tracks a dry brush of Army Painter Plate Mail. This is a bit brighter than I'd normally use, but yeah, I want to see what it looks like under a mud coat. Then it's on to painting the rubber treads on the tracks. For this I'm using matte black. With that dry, I wash the tracks in some watered down BS Dark Earth to make them look rusty or muddy or both. Why not both? Now it's time to add the tracks. For this I'm doing my standard snip, tuck and glue. The tracks in this model are really thin, which is quite nice as they wrap around the wheels easily. I was going to call the tank done at that stage, but sadly I ended up having a little accident. The camera fell on the model, breaking a lot of the little details and an entire side's worth of wheels. My bad, no one else's. Fixing that wasn't the easiest thing to do or the cleanest, so I'm going in with a BS Dark Earth wash to hide the super glue marks and disguise some of the excess glue as mud stuck to the tracks. Finally, to cover up some of the lost pegs on the front of the screen, I'm adding little chopped up pieces of foam painted with a couple of greens. Hopefully, when these are dry, this will hide my shame and look like camo netting or some field camo applied to the front of the tank. With that on though, I think I'm going to call this model done. This is the finished model. I'm very proud of how this one's come out. It's been nice to finally get round to painting the Swedish M90 camo pattern on a tank. In conclusion, the Trumpeter STRV 103 tank is a nice model kit, but it is a small and delicate build. I don't think this kit will be the best for first time modelers, as though it's simple to build, there are many fine details that will definitely need tweezers to add them without making a mess. I think that this model is best suited for an intermediate and above modeler. There are only a few little fit issues along the way when you're making this kit, but the one thing I think in this kit is practically useless is the paint guide. Why make the camo guide and add shadows to the drawings and then go print the thing in black and white? Not being funny, but a camo plan I think should be drawn out in flat colours or shades to make it easier to read. Thankfully the box has a mini colour version of this, but sadly this does not show a top-down view, making it not the most useful thing. This kit cost me £13 brand new, and I think for this price the kit's good value for money, as you get a small but very detailed model of an S-tank. Anyway, that's my build and review of the Trumpeter STRV Swedish S-tank. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video and find it helpful if you're building or thinking of buying one of these kits at home. If you made it this far, please consider subscribing, as it really helps the channel out. Until next time though, look after yourselves and have a good one. Goodbye.